Hello and welcome to this very exciting, get it? Spring holiday special episode of the Full Force podcast, brought to you by Reborn.com, with me, Christopher McLeod, AKA Diagnostik80. On this special eggisode, I have managed to resurrect the awesome Erik No, not those eggs, they're not for eating, Araña, and, and Patrick Hot Chocolate Picard Stewart. We will be taking a look at some of our favourite Back from the Dead, Action Force and G.I. Joe related moments in our top threes. It's the Full Force Spring Holiday Special.
Woo!
There we go. Guys, thanks for joining me on this one. Did you like your nicknames, by the way?
Amazing.
Yeah, I knew you'd like yours. What about yours, Pat? Are you a fan
of
the...
That is the first time I've ever been called hot chocolate, for sure.
Amazing. Well, I figured, after I called you Hot Picard on the Valentine's episode, I figured Hot Chocolate
It's a good
Picard.
follow-up, it is.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's a bit of a loose connection to the old Easter egg scenario, but I thought, it's good enough. And also, I didn't want to go too explicit with Erik, so I made it very vague. In any case, we will find out very soon what those eggs actually are for. But before we do that, we were not going to find that out. Before we do that, let's get stuck into these top threes.
None may challenge Serpentor!
Action Force and G.I. Joe have never been afraid to approach the subject of death. We saw many times in the multitude of different media over the years characters being killed, often in very violent ways. I'm looking at you, Battle Action Force. Well, on this episode, and in keeping with the resurrection theme, we thought it would be fun to look at some of those moments where a character comes back from the dead, so to speak, and I've got a few presenters I've managed to clone from the originals to help me. So let's start with Erik. What are your top three favourite Back from the Dead, G.I. Joe and Action Force moments, bud?
Okay, so I'm going to say my first one, my number three, is Storm Shadow.
Ooh.
When he was shot on the beach by the Baroness, clearly shot in the chest.
Clearly killed. Yeah, he was dead.
And then...
Can we just get a confirmation? Can we all agree that Storm Shadow definitely died there? Pat?
I would agree, yeah. I think that he did, yeah.
Erik says yes.
Yeah, I can't imagine that he didn't.
Yeah, and I'm also going to say, yeah, he's dead as a dodo right there.
Yeah. So when in issue 49, when they're resurrecting, when they're creating Serpentor, they put Storm Shadow in line in the vats. Mindbender makes a comment about something fresh in the mix of
so gross.
Yeah. So, and then...
We've got some fresh Storm Shadow batter in the mix.
Yeah, and puts him in the vat with his swords and everything. Like, it's just slides right in there. Like,
it's to get the essence of his weapons as well.
Yeah. So, Serpentor was not only part Storm Shadow, he was also part Samurai Sword. And so he... and then the shot with one of the dreadnoughts decides that he was gonna steal the sword out of the vat. Storm Shadow's hand comes up and grabs him, and you realize he's alive. And at one point, I don't remember if it's in that comic or a follow-up issue, but he kind of says he has like vague memories of the other people's memories running through him, and so it's like he's kind of messed up, and from that point on, I think that's really the turning point for Storm Shadow changing and kind of becoming a good guy and eventually becoming a Joe, and like we said, he was there's no way that he wasn't dead.
Mate, I've got one in my list when we get to it that was a similar thing. It's like, I'm sorry, but I know no one ever really truly dies in comics, but they were dead, definitely, 100%. There's always been a bit of like Arashikage mysticism around these characters, though, hasn't there? There's always been that kind of like possibility that they'll never quite, completely die.
Yeah. So that was one, and one, Storm Shadow was one of my favorites, as most of us, and so I was glad that he was back. So yeah, that's my number three, and my number two is Cobra Commander.
Oh, yeah.
You know, of course, he decides he's going to go straight.
No, he was definitely Pan, Cobra Commander.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. But he decides he's going to go good. I'll say that. Or he's going to at least try and not be, you know, he's going to try and make Billy proud.
Yeah.
And immediately Fred 7 takes out a gun, shoots him in the back, and then takes his armor and replaces him as Cobra Commander. What I always thought was funny is he says the good thing about the armor is anybody can be in it. At that point, nobody had ever seen Cobra Commander wear that armor.
Yeah, so it made no difference. Yeah.
It's not like he showed up in Cobra Commander's like outfit with the beer mask and stuff like that.
Anybody can be in this. Yeah, you're right. And anybody is in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the fact that everyone knew it was Fred, like pretty much from the off as well. Like other than like the lackeys and everything, the kind of the core character bad guys seem to know almost immediately. They just went along with it, kind of thing. Yeah.
I actually really enjoy the Fred 7 storyline as Cobra Commander, because I think it's a lot of stuff like that. Like all these key higher up Cobra guys know. They don't all know that everybody knows, though. And they're all trying to just manipulate him to do what they want anyway. So it was just a really fun dynamic during that little run of the book.
I'd argue as well that's one of the most iconic things in G.I. Joe with Cobra Commander. It's like most people know that he was killed and Fred 7 took over. You know, like most people know that that's something that happened in the comics. It's like one of the biggest and one of the longest running kind of little arcs that kind of went in the Marvel series, wasn't it?
Hasbro even eventually made 2 different figures, both a vintage style one and a 25th style one of that Fred in the Cobra Commander armor. So that was always very cool. But that's not who we're talking about.
Oh yeah, the resurrection part. My bad.
Then, you know, years later, the real Cobra Commander comes back, and you find out that he had other Crimson Guard, other Freds, spying on everybody. So they went and dug him up, and he wasn't quite dead, and they brought him back, and he'd been kind of hiding all this time and reamassing money and all this stuff. So, and he comes out, and what I really love about when he comes back is he is completely bat crazy when he comes back.
Yeah.
There's no calm, like he's still cunning and he's still like pulling all these strings, but he's so maniacal.
Yeah, ruthless.
From that point, and he's quoting, you know, all these things, and he's using a lot of alliteration, which was always hilarious.
That was Larry just showing off, wasn't it? That was.
Yeah, totally. And Larry must have just been having so much fun writing Cobra Commander after when he comes back like that, and he's just completely. In the first issue, he says he has no scruples, but I think that's when he really has no scruples at all whatsoever.
There was a definite change in his personality in the comic. Yeah.
And I like to think that he may have actually been dead for a while and was buried, and when he comes back, he really is. He's just not the same anymore. Like he's just a little different, and I really love Cobra. I mean, I love Cobra Commander anyway, but from that point on in the comic, he's just so wonderful to read.
I mean, he's like a pantomime villain almost, isn't he? He's got that kind of like over exaggerated.
He's over the top. He's so like vaudevillian almost. Like he's just so crazy, and he's just so much fun.
Yeah, totally.
Good
shout.
Thank you. My number 1 is I'm going to say, even though he's not necessarily a G.I. Joe character, this does happen in G.I. Joe comic.
Nice.
Is Bumblebee / Goldbug.
Good shout. Good shout.
Of course, in the first issue of G.I. Joe Transformers, I think it was the first issue, he's destroyed by the Joe team. When he's mistaken for a Decepticon, or kind of all the humans in the comics thought all of the robots were bad. They didn't really differentiate.
I always thought that was so out of character for the Joes in that
really
final scene, because I actually enjoyed that mini series. But like that moment, I'm kind of like, what? Where did they've basically turned into Cobra for this minute to like, let's destroy him, and he's like being really nice, and he just saved a kid's life, and it's just like, what?
They that story is really interesting because
it's that massive like thing they're sending out into space, isn't it? Like sort of energy,
giant ship, and it like things move on it, so they think it's a transformer at first. And that miniseries, I enjoy reading it, but it really is kind of a mess, and it's all over the place because at the time, in both Transformers and in G.I. Joe, there were these crazy changes happening. And editorial said, you have to keep this book in time with those two comics. So throughout the G.I. Joe versus Transformers miniseries, you have the shift from Cobra Commander to Serpentor, I think.
Yeah.
And then you have the shift from...
Oh, yeah, Prime dies.
Prime dies in the middle of it,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
Megatron disappears in the middle of it, and it's like Rat Bat or something. Like, it's crazy.
They retcon it with a little editorial note in there, don't they? Yeah.
Because it's so confused. The writer must have been just like so confused about what was going on. He's like, wait, what? I got to get rid of Prime now? Like, in the middle of this miniseries? Like, so it was just like, it was so crazy. But of course, Bumblebee is destroyed, and Mainframe starts to rebuild him. I think maybe it's Mainframe and Dial Tone or something like that. They start to rebuild him.
Yeah.
And then Ratchet, towards the end of the series, Ratchet comes along and is like, what did you do with this guy? Like, he helps finish him. And of course, then he's Goldbug after that.
Yeah. I always thought that was really weird to happen because obviously Bumblebee was such a huge character.
Oh, he's such an iconic part of Transformers.
And it's funny you mentioned that it happened, like that little mini series also kind of wasn't it oddly that it exists in one of the continuities and not in the other? Am I right in saying that?
It doesn't completely jive with either continuity.
Okay.
Of the books, and because the books weren't really made to be in the same universe to begin with. Yeah. So there are little hints here and there, but there's even like in one of the issues of Special Missions, there's like Transformer toy. Yeah. I think it's a Megatron, but they call it a Skyfire.
Yeah, they call it Jetfire. Yeah. And it's friggin' Megatron or Starscream or something. I can't remember it's one of those, isn't it? Yeah.
But they're not really meant to be in the same thing. Suddenly they're thrown into the same thing. And I'm for the record, I'm fine with Transformers and G.I. Joe existing together. But like at the time, it wasn't really meant to do it. And I even think I may be wrong, but I thought Larry Hama didn't want to write it when they asked, and that's why it's somebody else writing it.
I'm pretty sure that was the case because he said in the past that he was never really into doing that, and then oddly enough, he then later on was going to cross over and then wasn't allowed because of the other aspects, the fact they were doing it for Revolution and stuff. So yeah, it's funny how these things happen, but yeah. Awesome, man. So that's
my three.
That's your three. Some good choices there. I like them. And I must admit the Transformers G.I. Joe comic. I've read that recently and did an episode, almost like a thing with TFU, Anthony from TFU.info, where we kind of talked through it and everything. And he asked us to do like each person to like talk about an aspect of the comic that they really liked, and then it was put into an episode. Like everyone like that he knew was talking about this issue, and my thing was the whole General Hawk lovelorn moment kind of thing, where he's like smoking a cigarette, like kind of, or like wishing, like, because he fell in love with the I forget her name now, but the woman who is in charge of whatever it is, this whole like energy consortium thing. Yeah. And the fact that I think she gets killed at the end as well, doesn't she? Doesn't she get taken out by one of like a random... Anyway, we're not talking about that issue now. Yeah. Let's move on to Patrick, buddy, your top three, mate. Take us through your three, please, bud.
Okay. My first one being my number three, is a little bit of a... People are somewhat divided on this in the comics. I know whenever I read it, I was blown away and loved how well it fit into the previous issues that existed. But mine is Firefly. Whenever he came back, Firefly knows where the bodies are buried. He had been buried alive in the freighter along with so many other members of Cobra that were a lot of classic people. But as you said, Cobra Commander was a little bit nutty and was just taking all of that crazy Cobra stuff, putting it in one safe freighter, I guess, for later writing, and burying it underneath a volcano. And whenever Firefly came
the classic trope.
Yeah.
right,
Stick him in a freighter, bury him under a volcano. It's been done
it was such an interesting way
countless
of,
times.
Yeah, but as far as writing goes, it
Yeah.
almost feels like it was done intentionally
Yeah.
to just kind of sideline those characters and put them on pause. Just like, you guys are buried alive. Maybe you have supplies, maybe you don't.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've got like a decent way that I've written in that I can pull any of them out later when necessary. But for now, I don't need to worry about all these Cobra characters.
Yeah.
It was such a great thing that Hama had done at that point. And bringing Firefly back, I was always, as a kid, more of a... I didn't have every G.I. Joe, as a lot of people didn't. And I didn't have Firefly. He was one that I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
But since I didn't have him, maybe that's why I wasn't so against him being a ninja. But I loved Ninja Force. I thought that the ninja stuff that they were getting into and making more figures for such a big aspect of the comic book was a great thing.
Yeah.
And adding Firefly to that, for me, was a great touch. So I was all about that issue. That's still one of my favorite issues of the comic book. And all the things that they made him do that he was involved in prior to that issue, I think is part of what the importance is for me about that comic. Not just that he's, oh, you know, I'm a ninja, which, by the way, he actually says that he's not a ninja,
Yeah.
by the way, in that comic. He says that he has all of the training and the abilities of the ninja, but that he's more than that. So he doesn't even really view himself as a ninja at that point. It's a very, very good way of handling things. I love it.
It was a good reveal as well when you turn the page and it's like the faceless master thing as well, where he and I've done this on the show before, I've just done that. And that's how you become, that's the technique. It's like, how does he do that? Well, you just have to, like, it's the perception of others. So if you just do that all the time.
And I think Hama's swerve there was kind of supposed to be implying initially that it might have been Zartan because he had the holographic abilities and stuff. And then when you realize that Zartan's in the picture too, but just at the bottom, and because he's just the swordsmith's assistant or whatever, like it was a really nice kind of swerve that it was Firefly all that time.
There were some really great complex storylines out of the Arashikage aspect of things, and like loads of little. I don't know. People thought that he was dipping into that well too much, going back, not retconning, but like going back to that well to have more characters involved. But I thought Zartan's storyline, where he almost went good, he almost was going to be a good guy. Redeemed. Yeah, it was almost like a redeeming storyline. Yeah, and that never really transpired because of the other tragedy that struck, and the fact that he was killed, or killed himself, right? Because he was ashamed that he found out that Zartan was who he was. So that was like, again, that kind of added another level to it, another level of tragedy to it. And the Firefly thing was really interesting again. Like, I never really looked at Firefly and thought he's a ninja. But then again, I don't really look at Zartan and think he's a ninja. I don't really look at a few of those kind of characters and think they're ninjas. They were just in
Scarlet's
Ninja
not a
Force.
Ninja. He's just a martial arts expert.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like exactly. It's like it's just a fun sub team. It's marketing. That's what that is. Yeah. It's not saying everybody is a ninja on this team. It's like, it's just they're martial arts experts.
Well, they never say it, but General Hawk's third military specialty is marketing. So
the one coming up with all the brand logos, like the Warriors logo and the DEF one.
Sonic Fighters. Guys, you guys out here doing the audio, you need a team. You need a sub-team. You need to market yourself. Come on. This is Hawk, by the way. Let's get out there and market yourselves. I've got 2 logos to choose from. It's either Sonic Fighters or Supersonic Fighters. Okay, let's have both of them. That's exactly what Hawk is all about. I love my new. This is my new origin story for the Sonic Fighters. That's exactly what it is. Anyway, Pat, sorry, mate.
They want new outfits, but he's just like, sorry, that's not in the marketing budget. You're just going to have to deal with just have of old outfits.
We'll just paint
the supersonic guys. Then you can have some new outfits.
We'll even paint some of your skin like a road pig. Let's give you a gorgeous tan, says the Cobra Sonic Fighters marketing team.
And what happened to Order? He just doesn't like Law anymore. He's not dead. We don't want to imply that. They just don't hang out anymore.
No, they fell out. They're not in good standing. Anyway, it was all over a bitch. Get it? Anyway, carry on.
Okay. All right. So for my number 2,
I
had to wait for it.
Sorry, it has to happen.
A space there to put it in. My number 2 was and this maybe people won't agree with me, but it was
I disagree.
A death that happened and then we didn't see it because it's Duke from the G.I. Joe movie.
That is a great outside the box shout there, Pat.
Yeah, so my thought is we know that Duke was supposed to die, and he didn't because of the fallout from Optimus Prime.
That just sounds like Optimus Prime did a massive poo, by the way, fallout of Optimus Prime. But carry on.
That's just because you're still on number 2. But Duke was going to die, but then he was brought back through creative writing and a voiceover where he was just in a coma and will be fine. So
Duke is going to be okay. Yeah.
One of the most important to G.I. Joe fans situations where somebody was brought back from near final death.
Yeah, and we had like a little conversation about this before the recording, didn't we, Pat? About the Transformers almost like leading the way a little bit in terms of like breaking the ground, but then also making mistakes, I would say, for then other things to follow and say like, well, that happened in Transformers, let's change it this time around. The Duke death was one, wasn't it? And obviously that was something like you said, the fallout of Optimus Prime. We were talking about this, and I always said I think both scenes have a lot of like parallels, like similarities to them. How you've got, the team, the core characters surrounding him. You've got Scarlet acting as like Daniel in this sense, like the kind of even though it might be deemed as they didn't want to show the male figures kind of like crying over Duke. They actually did, which was really something I'm glad they did. I'm glad they had Hawk crying as well when he was, saying full force. By the way, I watched the Action Force version. But the parallels of like the team surrounding him and Scarlet acting as like Daniel in that sense, the humanizer of that scene, even though they're all human in that sense. But then, Duke actually like, tipping over and dying, like and the same kind of thing happening in the Transformers, but obviously they didn't have Duke turn into this like dark grey kind of. That'd have been really crazy. Or go, hey, Falcon, and pulls his chest open and pulls his heart out and says, "Here you go, brother. This is for you." But what would have been interesting as well in that sense is if obviously you've got a different dynamic in that the leadership is passing over. Now Duke is in a similar way. He's passing over to Falcon in a sense, isn't he? Like that's what is symbolically being done in that scene. Whereas in the other scene, there's a slightly different dichotomy where you've got Prime handing over the leadership to Magnus, even though it's Hot Rod who eventually will be taking that mantle.
See, I have a theory here that it was always actually meant for Magnus, but because he dropped it and Hot Rod caught it, it confused the Matrix.
That's genius. The Matrix is all like, oh, it must be this guy. Let's do a light show just to make it clear for everybody. Oh, no one noticed that? Okay, fair enough. We'll just put it now in Magnus's weird animated chest.
What would his name have been? Like, would it have been Ultra Magnimus Prime? Name would become.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Ultra Magnimus. Ultra Moptimus, he'd be called. But yeah, like I love that the parallels between those two scenes are really, really similar, and it's interesting that one dies for the other one. One sacrifices itself for the other one to survive, which is kind of what happened in the end.
Well, it's clear that in the movie they were kind of setting up for Falcon to be like the new kind of main character.
Yeah.
Where it was like Duke and then Flint and then and then the Sarge and then so they were kind of setting up for like Falcon, but like in G.I. Joe you can't just hand over the leadership like you can in Transformers.
Yeah, you can. You pull your chest open, you pull your beating heart out, and you stuff it into another human's chest.
I offer you the heart of leadership.
It's a contract. There you go. But yeah, that's a good shout, Pat. Really good shout. And something else we spoke about was the fact that it's interesting that in G.I. Joe, they were told specifically in the Sunbow, no one can die. Like, it has to be off screen if anything does happen. It's casualties you refer to people as. You always see like someone parachuting out of a plane, or you never see death necessarily. So it was always really interesting, which will come to one of mine later, that they do show kind of death in a way. But in Transformers, like, there's no way you could have had, like you said to me, Pat, earlier, there's no way you could have had like Cobra Commander like breaking into a G.I. Joe installation and just like shooting one of them through the face and having the blood pour out of their mouth and then like have the guy like clawing. It would have been Stalker clawing at the leg of Cobra Commander, and he's just like, such heroic nonsense, and then gets his hairdryer gun and just blows his brains out. Like,
they're dragging around the corpse of
Wheel
Parker in that one scene. You're like, oh my god!
Like dragging half a body of like Roadblock across the ground. Yeah.
I was in such denial about that scene whenever I was a kid, because Wheeljack was like one of my absolute favorite Autobots. He was my main Autobot that I played with until the movie came out, and I got other toys. Always of the argument of, if he's just completely dead and there's no hope for him at all, why are they moving his body around during this battle? I didn't quite understand it as a kid. And then it appeared through animation error, he was resurrected.
Yes, absolutely. I always thought that I must have been a cynical child to a degree, or just like I was thinking about it at the time. But when Prime died, I wasn't that sad, because I just figured, well, he'll be back. It's Optimus Prime. Like, he's like, if anyone is the icon for a brand, it's that guy. So like, I think I just assumed that it was done specifically for the film and that he'd be returning again, which eventually was the case, but not in the way I imagined.
Well, I think all of us were a little bit braced for that. I remember being in the auditorium watching the movie and hearing some kids sobbing and wondering why they were surprised, because the commercials, like even at the end of the commercials for some of the toys, they would have a very quick snippet to advertise the movie. And in a quick snippet, they would ask, does Prime die? So, I'm sure a lot of people thought, there's no way that's going to happen. But to some degree, you had to have been braced for it to happen anyway.
I always found his return to be so weird as well. Like that whole thing about like the zombie plague thing. And
well, they didn't know he was going to return permanently, though. Like they had that episode ready, written, and animated whenever the movie was coming out, and they realized that they were going to need to write a return of him. So here they had this reaction that was really rough, but yet they knew that they were also going to bring him back as a zombie and have kids watch him die again.
Yeah, and also they killed him off again after that, didn't they?
Well, when he came back in Dark Awakening for the one like zombie episode of Optimus Prime, he sacrificed himself at the end, like over.
He
sacrificed himself at the end, and there was the explosion.
And then it turns out he didn't die in that explosion as well, that someone grabbed him.
Yeah, at the beginning of the Return of Optimus Prime, it's like, well, there's a couple of scientists that sneak onto the ship right at the last second and pull Optimus off before...
Whoa! So he got lucky as well then, if they pulled him off before he died. That was nice.
But then in the Japanese continuity, where in Headmasters, where he's resurrected still because it follows the Sunbow continuity, and then he's in like 4 or 5 episodes and he gets killed again. Magnus becomes the leader again. Like, it's so like jarring.
I remember watching the Headmasters. I remember when Soundwave and Blaster die and become Sound Blaster and Twincast, yeah. And I remember seeing that episode and just being like, what? If it's that easy, and seeing how easy it was to resurrect them, and then to see how easy it was for them to fix Ultra Magnus when he was torn into pieces, and just thinking, damn, why was it so difficult to get Prime back in the, in the life saddle? But anyway, sorry, Pat, we've hijacked your top three with an in-depth discussion.
It was Duke. We were talking. That was all talk about Duke.
There you go. Thanks, Duke, for the sacrifice. Yeah, and also. We can also say that he is officially brought back at the end of Renegades as well. When we see that amazing, I thought that was adorable. By the way,
that's great. That little after credits scene.
So cute when he's like on the gurney and everything. He's like, I just had the craziest dream. It's like, oh my god, amazing. Anyway, sorry, back to you, Pat.
Okay, so for my number one, what I consider the greatest return from the dead in all of G.I. Joe history has to be the return of G.I. Joe toys to shelves in 1982.
Dun, dun, dun.
Nice.
Yeah,
another
out of the box.
Yeah.
But I kind of felt like this has to be the biggest thing. It's not like G.I. Joe hadn't seen a bit of a return prior to that, I want to say. I mean, well, I should say maybe it changed a bit prior to that, because Super Joe was technically G.I. Joe as well.
You don't have to get technical on this one. We get the point here.
Okay. Yeah, I don't need to dwell too much. G.I. Joe is on. We know the story, but it's an amazing story how there were just a lot of people that still felt that it was a viable brand, and they kept pushing it. And eventually it stuck, and the rest is history. We've been addicted ever since.
I always find it amazing as well that both Palitoy and Hasbro were working on these things separate from each other. They still had a relationship through Action Man and G.I. Joe 12-inch, so there was that kind of weird thing where they're both developing 3 3/4 figures, kind of like next to each other. Obviously, Hasbro's far superior in terms of articulation and all that kind of stuff, but it still amazes me that was happening, and literally the same year, the same toy fair, they revealed that information, and it's just everyone's like, whoa, it's crazy to me that was on their minds. I suppose Star Wars had a lot to do with that as well, though, didn't it?
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, that both of those would have been I guess tied for second place of shrinking G.I. Joe down to 3 3/4 inches. Because of Microman, which was also based on the 12-inch G.I. Joe body. So
Microman. Sorry, I love those adverts so much.
Yeah, they are amazing. All that old, like I collected Micronauts as a kid as well prior to G.I. Joe. So it was interesting to hear all the backstory of how all that stuff is somehow developmentally related. Yeah, so G.I. Joe
bonkers as well. Like when you
has to be the biggest.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. Totally, 100%. And I think it's crazy when you think about all those connections to the Japanese stuff. Like it's so weird. Like you wouldn't think about it, and then like you see like the engineering going into those figures, and it's like, oh right, that's where it came from. Oh, I see now. But yeah, that's wicked. Good shouts as well. Love those 2 cracking top 3s there, lads. I'm about to ruin it now with my 3. So I will start, as always, at number 3, because it would be weird to ruin everything at the beginning. And I'm going to go with something that popped up a second, earlier while we were talking, and that's Renegades. And in this case, Renegades Ripcord. So when Renegades burst onto the scene in November of 2010, I was like super excited, but also really impressed actually with like the new format, the designs, the animation, like the storylines were really good. The way the characters were reinvented and introduced into the show, like really freshened the brand up for me. It just made a lot of sense for them to kind of do what they did, but it just worked really well, I thought. And I actually thought it was a real shame that it was cancelled before it had a chance to actually fully develop, not just like the main core cast characters, because I think it did develop those guys really well, but like some of the fringe characters It's a shame they couldn't really go into more detail with those guys. But we still got 26 solid episodes. Like I said, delved into each of the main cast, incorporated some fringe personnel along the way. Ripcord was recruited into the team by Scarlet early on. He had a bit of a, funny humour about him and larger-than-life kind of attitude, but was a bit abrasive to some of the rest of the team. He would give them nicknames, and I know that he gave Roadblock his nickname because he wouldn't get out of the way and they're trying to walk past him. He says, "Out of the way, Roadblock," and things like that. And then, he calls Tunnel Rat because he's just this, gross little man that just likes eating dirt and bugs and stuff like that, and it's just really, really cute. And anyway, he was, like I said, Scarlet kind of recruited him, and she actually gave him his code name or his nickname. She called him Ripcord during their daring escape from the first Cobra facility in that first mission. And Ripcord sacrificed himself for the rest of the group to allow them to escape this group of bio-vipers. The facility blows up, and the team just assume he dies in the blast. But the best part about this whole thing was that the writers kept that ruse up for 20 episodes. You kind of start thinking, I thought he was still alive. I thought he's going to come back at some point. No way they're going to kill Ripcord off. He's in the intro, and he was such a big character in the kind of media push for this kind of stuff. So I thought, there's no way they're getting rid of him. And 20 episodes go by, and all of a sudden they reveal it, and it's genius for me because you kind of almost lose hope. You feel like it's just not going to happen. It's never going to happen after this amount of time. And then boom, it kind of makes that reveal way more effective. And I just thought was just really cool. So he comes back as this human bio-viper hybrid. He's got amnesia as well, which kind of means that he's being used by Cobra against the Joes. And then over time, he kind of comes, to, and they convince him to join the team again. And I just thought that was such a cool, way of having a character, even though he's not in it for 18 episodes or whatever. It's just, I think, really an effective way to do a character thing like that. And obviously, had it been given more serious seasons, then I think we would have kind of got more from him.
Yeah, I think Renegades is probably my favorite of the animations, and if they had kind of gone on with it, I think it could have been a really nice upgrade to G.I. Joe, bringing it more contemporary and stuff like that. But you're right. I mean, it was canceled before even the first episode aired at Hasbro. They were just they just decided that we knew that it was already done before it even aired in-house, and it was just it was heartbreaking because the designs are so good, the animation's gorgeous, the voice acting and the characters are fleshed out. They're unique and flawed as human beings and stuff. It was just such a good show. And Ripcord, that's a great. I would never have even thought to put him in. So that's a great call out.
I think one of the reasons it was on my mind was because I've been watching it recently, with it being up on YouTube and on Tubi, and we have the DVDs as well. And it's just one of those things that Kate really enjoys that too. So we tend to watch that quite often, and it's just, I think for me, one of the things I really like about when properties are rebooted, I love it when characters are reintroduced in interesting ways. In the Turtles comics, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics, when IDW kind of rebooted it, and we started getting all these characters again, almost like origins in a weird way. But the way we're introducing characters left, right, and centre, almost every issue was a reveal of a new character, and it was done in such a good way that I was really into it. And with Renegades, I felt the same way. The way they introduce all the, the fringe characters, the barbecue episode and the airtight episode, and Doc. They go to him because he's a doctor that's going to help them under the radar a little bit. And he just becomes Doc, and it's just that's genius. But there's just so many interesting character introductions in that show. And that, for me, is it almost counts as a plot point when they introduce a character. I know I think Andrew jokingly said, a character is not a plot point. But, Matt Damon is not a plot point and things like that. But, I think that was, what was it? Interstellar. Someone said Matt Damon is not a plot point. You can't have it. You can't have him because he's revealed to be this guy that's been on this planet, ahead of these guys, and it's Matt Damon. It's well, you can't be Anyway, that's irrelevant. But I just love the fact they were doing that, and the Airtight episode I remember really well, and I love the way that the figure, even though it wasn't 100% like the Airtight in Renegades cartoon, it was more like the vintage Airtight. I just love the way it balanced between the two designs in a sense, and created an amazing action figure as well. Anyway, that's my number 3. Go on, Pat. You want to say something? Say it.
I was just going to say one of the things that I really liked about Renegades that you're kind of touching on is that there became a little bit of a change in G.I. Joe over time in the original run, where to start it was this small team that was the hand-picked experts, and it was them up against these gigantic forces. But as you kept on adding character after character after character, and all these other resources of all these vehicles, they've got their own aircraft carrier, their own space shuttle. It seemed like the G.I. Joe team eventually went from this tiny thing to this huge organization that almost has no excuse as to why they can't get small jobs done. I think that Renegades did a really good thing in planning on having it be a core team that would encounter those other characters that would be allies.
Yeah.
But not every toy, I've often said this, that not every toy released in the G.I. Joe toy line needs to be on the G.I. Joe team or the Cobra team.
Yeah.
Having G.I. Joe have allies and having G.I. Joe have numerous people that they have to battle is great. Keep Cobra being the main one, but I think having you look at some other comic characters, like Batman, part of what the appeal is for Batman is his gigantic rogues gallery. And people call it the rogues gallery because we know to call it the rogues gallery because that's what gets talked about so often in regards to that character.
Yeah.
But with G.I. Joe, everything gets watered down and a Cobra logo put on everything. And then the G.I. Joe team kind of gets a little out of hand at the same time.
Yeah.
Much they have. And that
you can kind of blame General Hawk for that, being the head of marketing, can't you?
Yeah, right. You need to keep things under control a little better.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up. That was always one of my complaints as a kid about the Sunbow cartoon, which I still love, but was that G.I. Joe was this huge group with green shirts and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems at a point that in the comic at the time, they were still this small secret group. And part of the thing that makes a hero to me is when they're outnumbered, outgunned, and they
overcoming that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, when G.I. Joe is this huge thing, like you said, aircraft carriers and space shuttles and mobile command centers.
And a laser that can fire from anywhere in the world, yeah.
It kind of takes it away from them having to... They have less of a struggle to win the day.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think that's where A Real American Hero, as much as I love it as well, has got to that point where it's like they had to, Larry had to introduce Revanche. He had to kind of create more factions and bring bring the October Guard back to life. There's another one. There's another back from the dead moment. There's an honorable mention to the October Guard in Larry's A Real American Hero comic.
The other thing, bouncing back to Renegades for a second, the other thing that I really liked about Renegades, and this is just a personal thing, is it kind of disconnected a little bit from the military. Yeah. A lot of them were military, but a lot of the guys they encountered along the way.
Barbecue was a firefighter in the local town. Doc was just a doctor. Like, he wasn't like a, yeah.
So it kind of disconnected them from the military. It disconnected them from their resources because they were on the run in that Cobra van. And that was really interesting to see how they were the underdog in every single episode.
You feel like
Cobra always had the upper hand.
You feel like they had to MacGyver a lot of situations as well, didn't they? Yeah, totally. Anyway, so, okay, well, that's Renegade's Ripcord is my number 3. My next one's a bit of a cheat, but only because the guy keeps dying, all the time. And that's Sneak Peek. Bit of a cheat here, because it's happened a number of times. We all know about Owen King, the Owen King file name, Bangor, Maine birthplace, due to Stephen King and his son Owen. He first appeared in issue number 73 during the Cobra Island Civil War storyline, and he helped with the first Joe recon team on the island. Now, I really enjoyed these issues and loved his appearance because we managed to get a reprint of a part, not all of it, but a part of the Civil War story in the holiday special issue that we're actually using for this episode as the title card. Because of the Serpentor cover and all that kind of jazz. And also, if you haven't noticed, we've got a Serpentor theme running because obviously he is almost like the king of resurrection. If you think Arise, Serpentor, Arise. There's another honourable mention to Serpentor because he's not coming up in these lists. So anyway, we only got Tiger Force sneak peek in the UK. But I really loved his accessories. I actually really loved the figure. I thought he was incredible. Yes, he looked a little bit chubby and a little bit goofy, but I kind of loved that. I felt like there was a charm. I felt like there was a really cute design thing going on there, that they didn't just make him like every other hero action figure type thing. It's like he's just this little dumpy dude. Like, and everywhere, like, you know, the art was a little funny as well. Like, he had that real, like, full of character face and everything. So, you know, I really, really enjoyed the figure, despite the shortcomings, shall we say. Let's get to his first death. So, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 113, The Battle for Benzene. Famously, lots of characters die in this kind of era of the comic. Sneak Peek was actually gunned down while protecting a boy in the line of fire. The Joes are unable to help him until the enemy is stopped, and by that time it happens, it's too late. Dusty carries his dead body, bear in mind, back to the LZ and makes sure to take care of all his personal affairs because he promised he would do so. After such an impactful death, it would seem that Larry completely forgot about these events as he wrote the character back into the comics during A Real American Hero continuation in the IDW continuity. He randomly appears in issue 164, which led Larry having to scramble to retcon the character back from the dead in issues 168 to 170. We find out that Sneak Peek faked his own death to go deep undercover in Darklonia, which, I mean, how? Because Dusty literally carried his dead body to the how do you fake that? Like,
yeah, he switched himself with another dead body from the battlefield that was like shot in the face.
It's remarkable what Larry did to retcon that in there. But I mean, like, especially with everything,
had to be in on it. That's all. He was like, shh, stay quiet.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even in on it. That's the other beauty part of it. We find out, like, and I tell you what, though, I will say that I'm kind of glad Larry made that error, because how else are you going to get a spotlight for a couple of issues on a fringe character like Sneak Peek? Like, there's no way we'd have got that little subplot where he's talking about how he's in Darklonia on this deep cover mission, and none of the team could know about it. Only only the marketing manager could know about it.
Marketing general.
And he's like, "Don't worry, Sneak Peek. I've covered you in Tiger Force paraphernalia and sent you to the UK. Everything's going to be fine." It's like, Hawk, I don't get this new thing that you're doing. I don't understand it. And also, you seem to have reinvented yourself, and you're wearing a spacesuit with a flying backpack. Hey, I'm the marketing manager. I can do whatever I want. Origins. This is going to be the
G.I. Joe Origins.
Hawk G.I. Joe Origins movie. It's the next one, I guarantee it. But yeah, like, there's no way we'd have had that, I don't think. So I'm really kind of happy that he is brought back. It gives us this really interesting, like, conversation with Dusty in the issue, and like I said, puts a spotlight on the character we never would have had an opportunity to kind of get that. So anyway, there is a second death for Sneak Peek in codename only, and so a different character, Anthony Buke, took the codename Sneak Peek in the Devil's Due comics and was ultimately killed during a deep cover operation to infiltrate the Dreadnoks. Sadly, he hasn't returned from the dead, but then neither of the Devil's Due comics, which became disavowed once the IDW continuity restarted A Real American Hero. So that's my number 2, and it's effectively Owen King Sneak Peek, which, again, like, it blows my mind that Larry had to retcon that, but I'm kind of glad he did in the end.
Some great stories in comics are because somebody forgot or didn't know something, and then they had to go back and explain it.
Yeah.
because they made a mistake. And some Wonder Girl, Donna Troy, is a great example of that. Her first initial appearances, it's actually stories about Wonder Woman as a teenager, much like Superboy was stories about Superman as a teenager. The writer who was introducing the Teen Titans didn't know that.
No way.
Had never read them, had assumed it was a sidekick, and put her in the Teen Titans. And then they had to come along and explain who she was.
That's amazing.
That she was a separate character. It's so crazy. And
I did not know that. That's incredible.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, Donna's been around forever, and he's a mainstay in DC, in the DC universe. She's even in the Titans show, the TV show, and great character. And her creation was a mistake.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Okay, well, there's another one. We're getting some amazing info out of this episode. It's great. Well, that's my number 2 anyway, Sneak Peek. So love Sneak Peek to death because of that. But anyway, my all-time Back from the Dead G.I. Joe moment happens to come in the awesome Sunbow animated episode Worlds Without End, when a stolen matter transmuter malfunctions during a daring escape on a rickety wooden train bridge. It propels the Joes into another dimension, a parallel universe, if you will. I wrote this earlier, and I've written it in such a way that it sound like some sort of hilarious presenter. As the team struggles to find help of any kind, they resort to making tracks to their base, only to find it has been taken over by Cobra. Upon taking control of their own base, they find, to their dismay, that a lot of the Joes have been killed in action and that Cobra has taken over the world. When Steeler gets bitten by a weird pink bug, it makes him go mad, and in a fit of depression and sadness, learning of his fellow Joes' deaths, he runs away in probably one of the funniest parts of the episode.
Of G.I. Joe
ever. It's like this really dark scene. You've got this mental health breakdown. You've got this real darkness. You've just found out loads of Joes are dead. And then you see Shaggy from Scooby-Doo running away.
And the voice actor is just crazy.
Is it Latta?
Chris Latta.
Yeah, Christopher Collins, who was Chris Latta, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I was right. Yeah, because I thought I recognised it. It's very Starscream, isn't it, when he goes mad? Yeah. So yeah, Chris Latta, amazing. Like that voice for Steeler is, you wouldn't initially you wouldn't think it's him until he starts screaming and going crazy, and then it's like, oh well, there you go, it's Starscream. It's Cobra Commander. Yeah, more famously, Chris, Cobra Commander. Thanks, Pat. Rest in peace, Chris. Not me. I mean Chris Latta. Oh, there's a resurrection I'd love to have. I'd love to have him back as a voice. Imagine him doing voice acting now. Like, the characters he'd be like bringing to life would be insane. Especially, and I feel like he would have been the default choice for every iteration of Cobra Commander and Starscream, just like Cullen and Welker. Just as Cullen and Welker have been for the Transformers, I think.
Trying to Soundwave.
There was a really interesting thing that the Mapes, obviously, they've been finding all of these awesome like old recordings of Transformers and G.I. Joe cartoons and everything. They're always posting stuff on their YouTube channels and stuff. And one of the things they came across was the fact that Latta did a couple of random noises for characters, like I think it was Laserbeak and someone else, and it was like they wouldn't have known it was Latta had they not had this bit of recording where I think it was Wally Burr or whoever was doing the Transformers voice directing at the time was directing Chris to do some Laserbeak sound effects, and no one knew who did it before then. So it was like really cool that like that kind of came out. So yeah, anyway, Chris Latta, legend.
Chris Latta's also in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation as a Klingon, I believe.
I've seen an image of that. Yeah. Amazing.
I actually just rewatched the first episode, Encounter at Farpoint, and Michael Bell is in almost the whole episode. He's one of the guys on the planet.
Didn't Michael Bell also do the voice of Duke's dad in Renegades, right? Yeah, I do love it when that's done, like kind of fan service a little bit as well. That's really cool. Anyway, coming back to Worlds Without End. So Steeler runs off like Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. Grunt goes after him in the Ore Striker. Once he finds him and catches up with him, they're in the middle of this proving grounds area. And what they stumble across was one of those things that as a kid, you never quite leaves you. And it's the three skeletons still wearing their uniforms so they can be identified. And helmets as well. You've got to love that. And it's Steeler, Grunt, and Breaker. So he stumbles across these, and it's the way that they stumble across them. The animation at this point is just gorgeous. And you've got Grunt carrying Steeler, who's in a bad way, and he's dragging his feet behind, and then they trip over this hand, this skeletal hand, and it's, Grunt, I believe, that they first trip over. And like the camera zooms in, and it's like this skeleton. It's like, what? And you know, as a viewer, it's Grunt, it's Steeler, it's Breaker. That's what you're looking at here. But they kind of come to that conclusion by taking the dog tags and looking at them, and it's just like, damn, man, that's deep. It's dark. It's like, they're finding their friends, but they're not, and their own selves are dead. It's like the most, imagine yourself in that situation and seeing yourself dead on the ground. Like how weird that would be. And like, it's just such a well-written episode. And what I really like about it is that at the end of the episode, they're going back through the portal, which is just the most hilarious thing. If Breaker's calculations are correct, they should be right about there. And it's like this portal just like whoa, and it's like, how did you not see that before? Like, how did it take you to like go, it must be around here somewhere? Just look, there it is, massive portal in the middle of the friggin' of nowhere. Anyway, they're all jumping through, and then Flint and Jay are about to go through, and Steeler says, look, we're not going anywhere, staying here. And then Grunt says, yeah, I'm going to stay with my buddy. And Breaker says, I heard what happened to my version of me out here too, so I'm going to stay as well. Or was it Clutch? I've been saying Breaker, but was it Clutch?
It was a way for them to write out three characters that they were never going to do anything with in the show.
Exactly, yeah. And this is... Yeah, Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch. I apologise. I'm going to slightly redo that again. I'm just going to say Clutch and cut Breaker out whenever I say it. I'm retconning. It was Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch. That's my error. I've just got excited when I was writing.
Clutch is going to be okay.
Breaker's going to be a-okay. But so obviously, like they find, they're basically explaining that we're going to stay behind. I heard what they did to my version of Clutch, and I'm going to stay as well and help rebuild Action Force. So it's like a really interesting way for them to, like you say, like to kind of sidestep some characters rather than like in the Transformers where it's like, we need to kill everybody so that we can get this next wave of figures out. It's like, we can't really do that, so how do we get around it? And I just think that was a really intricate and well thought out way of doing that. So really, really, really amazing stuff. And also I will mention that Martin Pascoe was the writer of Worlds Without End, who recently passed away. Recently, it was last year, I believe now. But so again, fantastic bit of writing, wonderful two-parter episode, and it was Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch coming back to life in a really cool way. So that's my number one.
None may challenge Serpentor.
I think we've got it. I think we've made it to the end of our top threes, guys. That was great. Now, before we go, finally, I'd like to give you both a chance to bring something back from the dead in the Joe universe that as yet hasn't been brought back. Eric, we'll start with you. What have you got for me?
During the Trucial Abysma storyline, they killed a bunch of Joes. The Saw Viper killed a bunch of Joes.
Never heard of it. Never been mentioned. Ever.
Nobody ever talks about those. A bunch of characters died there. I think it was like Crankcase, Metal, and Quick Doc. For me, the two that hit me the hardest were Doc and Breaker. So if I could bring back one of them, it would be Breaker, and it's because he's white. No, it is. No, it's there's a very good reason, because Doc was one of my favorite Joes as a kid. But those two hit me the hardest. Doc hit me harder, especially because it was such an emotional moment.
Oh yeah.
Because the Saw Viper doesn't just shoot him, he shoots him in the face and it's awful. And the Joe's Quick Kick just breaks down completely. Like, it is just this powerful moment, and I wouldn't want to take that away, but by bringing him back.
Yeah.
I feel like there are some deaths in comics and fiction that I love when they're reversed for various reasons. But the Doc one, it would take away from that moment. I feel the same way about Jason Todd in the Robin and Batman in the DC comics. They should have never brought him back because it erases the importance and the impact of the scene where he was killed by Joker.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
agree,
so that's the reason I would pick Breaker. And the reason Breaker hit me so hard was I'm a huge fan of the OG-13. That first year of comics is so good. That first year, I mean, the toys, they're a little less than the next couple of years. And G.I. Joe, the sculpting just got nicer. They all got their own heads and their own bodies and stuff like that. But even then, those original characters have really stuck with me through the years.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a heartbreak to see one of them die and not be around for future comics and issues and stuff like that. And I realize he's been brought back, and it's not real. He's been brought back he's been in toy form a number of times since then. And
he was really good. His character in Renegades was fun as well. That kind of like online kind of hacker type guy.
He's like a paranoid hacker. That was fantastic. But I would love him to be back in the Hama, A Real American Hero continuity.
Give it time. Larry will probably accidentally drop him in there at some point. No,
it's okay.
Really good shout as well, and it's that kind of lends itself a little bit to the refresh, doesn't it? The toy refresh scenario and getting like dial tone to take over from the radio communications and things like that. But I totally agree though. Breaker was a cool character, and he was in so many of the Action Force VHS tapes that I had that connection to him as well. Like, the bubble gum and just the way he was just really cool, and he was used really good ways. Flint's Vacation stands out to me as a really good use of his, especially when he does that one where he's like, they're taking that little installation and he punches that like Cobra Trooper in the face. But it takes him ages to do it. Like, the animation's really good, but he's like saying this one-liner, and he's just looking at him like that, and then he goes, and it's like, it's a great hit and everything, and really good animation, but it's like the guy would have shot you by it in the time it took you to like punch him in the gob. But no, I really like that. That's a good shout, that one. Were you a fan of Breaker, Pat?
For sure. I really like the thought process that went behind that, too. Just the original Joes, as I was saying, it was that core team up against incredible odds. And, they are kind of the classic G.I. Joe team. So it is a shame that, we've lost one of them.
Yeah.
Only one, though, because the rest accidentally come back every single time.
I always liked the idea that he was the communications guy, and he was always popping gum, and it was kind of an annoying trait that Hama gave him. And if you've ever been around me when I'm chewing gum...
Oh, it's so annoying. I'm just kidding.
Snap and pop the gum all the time. So it's like, it's just one of those... I have a kinship to Breaker. No, but I can see it. I know it's annoying, and it's but it's a habit I do. And especially when I drive. So it's like, it's kind of... I get that it's like this annoying habit that Breaker has.
And it's that fact that obviously he's in audio and communications, so that's going to be like affecting that entire job, isn't it? I love that the 25th figure gave him that
was fantastic.
The bubble. That was
sure.
That was next level. And then, well, you could kind of say that he's been brought back in the live action movies.
That's true.
I'm kidding, of course. The law of bringing someone back kind of means within the universe that you're discussing them in.
You could say that he was killed, though, in the second live action movie when it's implied that most of the G.I. Joe team was wiped out.
Very true.
That those 40 people at that camp were the entire G.I. Joe team. Right. When in the previous movie they had this pit of thousands of...
Whenever I think of that particular scene, I always kind of like I'm drawn to that horrible scene where the guy opens the tank kind of hatch, gets out, and he kind of like does some sort of weird wolf cry, like oh oh or something like that, as if it's really corny as shit. And I think the guy is, I don't know the actor, but he's like it's a background actor, but he's actually got a code name.
Yeah, I want a bunch of those characters in that scene had code names, even though they didn't say them in the movie, but they're listed in the credits, and they were listed in the script as well.
Yeah, it was the guy that played Dick Casablancas from Veronica Mars. What was his name? Ryan Hansen.
Yes. Oh, it's Grunt.
Okay.
So he plays Grunt. So he gets out of that like tank or whatever, and he does this awful like corny wolf call, like oh oh, kind of like they've just finished the mission. It's just always rubs me the wrong way, and I always think about that when I think about that movie.
It's been years since I've seen that movie on purpose.
I got the feeling that his character actually had other scenes that were cut.
Yeah. So
they kept that part because it was the shortest thing that they could keep and fulfill the promise that he would be in the movie, while whatever else he had was just cut for time. That's the version I got.
Pat, have you seen the extended version of G.I. Joe Retaliation by any chance? Because I haven't seen
the Snyder cut of Retaliation.
I would watch a 4-hour version of Retaliation.
But there's also a black and white 4-hour version of Retaliation.
And Aquaman's in it. I don't understand why Aquaman's in it at all. Sorry.
Snyder should just put, like, at some point in one of his movies, like, somebody sits down to watch a movie, but then in the extended cut, you just insert that movie. And
you watch the movie with them?
And then that actor just does an audio commentary to the movie.
Oh my god, that would be so insanely brilliant. That's amazing.
That is the most meta thing I've ever heard in my life.
That actually would work out for a Deadpool movie. That wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really good way of doing commentaries anyway. Just seeing a group of people sitting around watching a movie, talking about it, as opposed to watching the movie and just hearing their voices. Or watching a film with friends. There's a DVD commentary.
Or you could just have people over and watch a film.
That's very true. Maybe in about a year's time, though, when
yeah.
even though we do it all the time. Okay. So the extended 8.5 day long Retaliation director's cut. Have you seen that, Pat?
I have watched it. I think there's a website that covers differences in various cuts. I think it's called moviecensorship.com or something very similar.
Cool.
Google it. And the two that really stuck out in my mind around the same time frame was G.I. Joe Retaliation and the Wolverine Unleashed edition, because there was X-Men Origins Wolverine that was a movie.
It happened.
And then there was the Wolverine and the Unleashed version of that. And G.I. Joe is a similar extended cut, kind of like that, where you really need to watch every scene closely, because sometimes it's just the way that the movie is framed to frame things out of picture. Sometimes it's a different take. Sometimes it just extends a little bit more. But all told, especially with the Wolverine, it's a much better cut. With G.I. Joe, I could take either one for the most part. There wasn't that much more to it. I think that it was mostly just fun to have that as a bonus.
It was on a specific release, wasn't it? Like a DVD release, wasn't it?
It was. Originally, like the week that it came out, that was exclusive to Best Buy. But I think that at some point, either through streaming or some reissue of the disc or something, I'm pretty sure the G.I. Joe one was available again later.
I kind of want to see that, because there's a few scenes. Like, isn't there like a bar scene where Flint's got no shirt on? See, I want to see that. That's the kind of content I turn up for.
Yeah, that's right. There is.
Forgot
about that until you mentioned it. But yeah, that was definitely a scene. It didn't have much extra Ryan Hansen that I can recall.
Oh, okay. So no grunt, no deal.
Veronica Mars.
Loved
him in Veronica Mars. So I was excited whenever he got, whenever somebody that you've liked in something gets denounced for a property you're also attached to and excited about. It's
Which
energy, and then the movie happens, and he has a woo-woo moment, and
which character was he in Veronica Mars?
Dick Casablancas.
Grunt. He was Grunt in Veronica Mars.
The other
He was Grunt in Veronica Mars. Yeah, Dick Casablancas he's from the first season. He's one of those characters that started off as just kind of a side character, or maybe even as a cameo. But
the surfer dude.
I think he was a surfer. He was
the long blonde hair and
Logan's.
Oh, okay.
Logan's close friends.
Oh, it's Logan.
Dick and Beaver. Dick and Beaver Casablanca.
Can we stop saying disgusting things on this show, please?
But he's one of those actors that just did so well with a role that they expanded his role in that show. Like, he became a regular character because people liked him because he did so well with his portrayal. Yeah. So I was excited for him to be in G.I. Joe, and then it was just very, very...
Did you know Dick Casablancas in English is Penis Casablanca?
Oh, really?
Yeah, just wasn't sure if you knew that or not.
That's the town you're from, right?
Yeah. Anyway, Ryan Hansen aside, I've even forgotten what we're doing now. But that was, that was. You know what? I'm not a fan of. Obviously, I don't like it when you get like an actor that you really want to see in a film, and they get demoted to some really crap position. In that similar sense there with Ryan Hansen. Yeah. Brendan Fraser, Rise of Cobra.
Oh yeah, terrible.
What a shame that was.
Yeah.
And wasn't that just a walk-on from the beginning though? Like, he was just kind of showing up.
Yeah. But my God, I'd have preferred a better walk-on than that. Like just something that was like a little bit better than what was it? Was the Lieutenant Stone?
Lieutenant Stone.
That isn't even worth doing, in my opinion. Like, that isn't even worth homaging, is it?
At one point in the script, he was Flint, and then
Gung Ho, right?
He was Gung Ho.
Yeah.
And they kept changing it because Hasbro kept telling them you can't make him a character that we might use in a sequel. Like, so they were just.
So they literally here's the list of characters you can have. Grand Slam, Captain Gridiron.
If he was Captain Gridiron, I would have been all behind it.
That's true. I think the Lieutenant Stone one was a misstep because there are other characters
that they were never going to use.
They were never going to use that you could easily put in there, and people would have been like fans. Would have
been
like
Sergeant Slammer.
Wow, that would have been insane and also really confusing. He should have been Zorana. Anyway.
He should have just been Brendan Fraser. It would just be another actor added to the Joe team.
Yeah. Or he comes on and it's Matt Damon. Anyway.
He should have been George of the Jungle.
Yes. Okay, we can agree on that. George of the Jungle walk-on would have been superb there.
Just going to say, at this point, I just think we need to resurrect our train of thought. Was it Breaker?
Yeah, way off the rails.
Yeah, you're right. That was Breaker. Well done. Good shout. I agree. I think, Breaker's really cool. And Pat, then. Okay, cool. Right, you're up next, mate. What would you like to bring back from the G.I. Joe dead?
Okay. It actually took me a long time to think of this, and then whenever I did, I said to you, I know what I should be answering, and I think that as I was typing it to you, you were typing the same thing back to me.
I knew exactly what you were going to say.
And it's... Come on, it's G.I. Joe O-rings. G.I. Joes with O-rings, not just the O-rings themselves.
We need those O-rings back. We just need bags and bags of O-rings back. Just because I basically need to fix a bunch of my figures, so can we just bring those back, please?
No, but I kind of feel like the G.I. Joe O-ring figures are such a unique style, especially in the vintage era. I mean, if you look at 1994 and look at 1982, certainly there were huge changes over time. But when they were resurrected in 97 and, in the early 2000s, that era felt more like it was attempting to infuse as much detail and deco as possible onto an older style. But for me, there's a lot of charm in that old style. Yeah, you can see the rivets, and in a modern figure, you would hide rivets. There's a lot of stuff that's very obviously done about them. But I think much in the same way that Lego minifigures have retained their style over time. You know, they've added some things, like now we have tampos on the sides and on the backs, and when I was little, they didn't even have bendable arms and legs at first. But
yeah,
whenever there's something that's such a distinct style, I think that you could do that with the vintage O-Ring Joes and bring them back and actually have that old charm to them without just having straight up reissues. So that's what I would like to see brought back, is vintage style O-Ring G.I. Joe. And not like the new sculpt era. Like, use the original buck for sculpting on it. And make them not have crazy amounts of undercuts or additional camouflage. You know, do them in that vintage style. That's what I would like.
Simplify.
Yes, very simplified. Yeah,
and get it back to and that's one of the things I actually think. One of the things I think is a big misstep with G.I. Joe current and toys in the past 10 years or so is they're not really doing anything to bring kids in. If you backtrack and try and put some stuff, not try and add stuff in, but really try and simplify, bring that cost down, make it so a kid sees a G.I. Joe figure. At least when we were kids, we would see a G.I. Joe figure, and there were very little deco hits. It was very clear what they were, you would look at the figure and you knew what they did.
Yeah.
But now G.I. Joe figures are so over detailed with all these textures and all this paint and all this crazy stuff.
It's an adult's game, isn't it, basically? Yeah.
It's an adult game, and they're gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. But they're not as appealing to a kid because they're just a sensory overload.
Yeah.
I think that's a great choice, Pat. And I would love to see O-Ring style like they're doing with Star Wars, where they do the vintage style. Like they have the Mandalorian figures coming out now.
The retro,
like the old Kenner figures, and they're really cool. And it's a lot of fun.
To expand on your point there, Eric, I think as well, when they do the kid-based stuff, it's always done to such a simple degree that it almost just becomes a pointless exercise. It's almost like goes too far the other direction, doesn't it? There's a balance in there that can probably hit more than not just kids as well. But I think that would be something I'd love to see.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Pat clearly wants to see vintage O-Ring stuff, so it's like, yeah, I feel like there's a nice balance in there somewhere. Phoebe agrees too. Thanks, Phoebes.
Yeah. Phoebe's right there with us, and it is a thing. Whenever you tell, and I've been guilty of this myself. When designers are told make it for kids, and the marketers and the designers start brainstorming and talking. I'm sitting there talking to Hawk, and we're brainstorming.
Here's a brick with a face on it. Yeah, General Hawk.
Nowadays, you're right. The pendulum swing mentally is to. If it's for kids, it has to be for preschool kids. That's not what I mean when I'm saying for kids. It should be for 8, 9, 10, 12-year-olds. It needs to be. It can't be add Play-Doh with the figures. That's not what we're talking about. It's but there's other ways to do it. But also making it that color palette, that simplified color palette, that solid painted spots, and not Snow Job is a perfect example, the original Snow Job. He's this field of white with a couple of black and brown hits, and then that bright red beard. And it's so attractive and so cool to look at. But then if you look at that same figure from 97, where he's got the yellow washes or the brown washes and stuff, he's not as attractive a figure.
Yeah, totally agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think that there's definitely an appeal to the simplification. For years, it was the Mega Blocks or what's now Mega Constructs that in their own right are great things. I have a bunch of those. There may even be some right behind me. But a lot of people who are buying Lego, because they're also building block toys that are fair. It's a fair comparison.
Yeah.
But people would criticize Lego for not adding in detail and more articulation. And to some degree, I did really like the Creon figures more than I like the Legos, because my mind is open to Lego expanding a little bit, but there is a charm for sure of, you know, sticking to that style and making kind of uniform and match. You know, whenever something new comes out now, it matches something that somebody bought 10 years ago.
80 years ago, yeah.
It's definitely an expression of a style that something gets translated into Lego rather than Lego needing to adapt to that thing. And I think that you could have a the very simple old G.I. Joe style isn't just about the construction with the T-bar and the O-ring and the rivets. Because there were other figures out that had those things, like, you know, Battlestar Galactica or Chips figures or any of the Migos stuff or Remco. Like, all that stuff, yeah, they had that kind of construction. But there was a style that was special about G.I. Joe, and that is something that I would like to see resurrected, not just the O-ring.
Yeah.
And I'm in the opposite camp where I criticize Mega Blocks, Mega Constructs, because I think they go too far with their sculpting and detail and stuff. I wish they would scale back a little bit. Not all the way to Lego, but like you said, the Creons were somewhere kind of in between. And that was very appealing. So,
yeah.
Well, the thing I liked about the Creons is that they actually added to the building, like the things that they added to those added to the building block nature of the toy. They added a peg hole to the side of the legs, which actually added...
Making the arms the same diameter.
Yep, the arms the same diameter. Now things, you know, that are a clip size of the hand can clip onto the side of the arm.
I was actually part of the original design brainstorming team for the Creons.
Much respect. I loved the way
I didn't do the final design in the end, but, you know, it was something that we all talked about, like, together and stuff like that. It was... Yeah,
I mean, they are clearly still a building block figure, whereas Mega Constructs have gone off and done something else. I mean, I opened up some Masters Universe stuff, and it's always a little bit weird that you build the stand, and then they have, like, a staff or something. You pop the top on, and that's the extent of them feeling like they belong with building blocks at all. They're miniature action figures at this point.
They're really just gorgeous little tiny action figures.
Agreed. Yeah.
With some things.
I think the one Mega Constructs thing that nearly killed me, though, and Kate, was building the Technodrome, the Turtles Technodrome. It took us like 6 months, but only because it was over the period of time that we were getting married, and I had to leave the country for 4 months, and then the fiancé visa had to happen. So there was a reason for that. But it took us so long to build this thing, and it felt like this feels like, you know, you're doing something Lego. But then as time has gone on, like the figures, you just bust them out of the package and it's there. Like there's nothing, you don't do anything to make them. Like the only figures you build were the ones that came with the Technodrome, and I think maybe one of the other big play sets. You don't actually, you know, they come fully formed. So it's like there's not much in the way of building anything necessarily, and you're just collecting, like you say, gorgeous miniature action figures is what you're getting. Yeah, which is not a bad thing at all. No. But anyway, yeah. So resurrecting the thought process again. That's a brilliant one, Pat. Great shout for the O-ring G.I. Joes. And yeah, now I've got one. With my choice, I'm going to go and delve back into the Marvel IDW Comics continuity, and it's a bit of a stretch because obviously, you know, well, we've had Sneak Peek come back, but it's not like the Battle Force 2000 have made a strong resurgence. But my one in the similar scenario with the Trucial Abysmia battle is Quick Kick. And even though in that comic he was drawn with the weirdest long hair ever, he kind of has your hair actually, Eric, in that story. But you've got to understand that Quick Kick to me was like Snake Eyes for most people in the US, like Storm Shadow for a lot of people in the US. You know, that kind of martial arts character who was leading the way in like the Action Force comics. You had Flint and Jay, and you had, you know, Roadblock was big in the comics too, but you also had like Quick Kick, who was, you know, had his own issues. He had a little spotlight issue. He introduced Shang-Chi, which was another Marvel property that they brought in to kind of like interact with the Action Force universe. It only happened in this one story, and it was that that Quick Kick and Shang-Chi trained under the same master and all this kind of stuff. So they were like, connected in that sense. But there was just so much about Quick Kick that I loved. I loved the design. He was one of my first action figures I had. Him and Flint were the first two International Heroes Action Force Hasbro figures I had. And it was just so cool, like the black pants, like no shoe, like no socks or anything, just feet out there. The sash with the what I thought were just like cute decorations, but they turned out to be bloody huge, like shuriken or something. Like in some aspects, they were used as big throwing discs and stuff. Yeah, just the headband, very Karate Kid. I loved him. I thought he was amazing, and he was actually from China in the Action Force run. I think he was from Canton, China. That was another aspect that made him really interesting. It wasn't like, what I found or noticed about in the US was everyone's birthplace. It was either Rhode Island or it was in the States somewhere else. So there was like 6 other birthplaces in there too. But it was always really like, I don't know, very constrained to a degree. And I like the fact that in Action Force it was very global. And Quick Kick, like I said, was such a huge character. He was in so many cool issues of the comic. And obviously in the Marvel run, he was killed in Crucial Abysmia, which always devastated me. I was really close to him and Crankcase because I had the Ore Striker as well. So Crankcase was a big one, huge in the Action Force world again as well. And so these characters meant a lot to me. So to see them die in the Marvel run and then not have that opportunity to see more stories from them in A Real American Hero and IDW has really affected me. And I know that Larry did a special kind of throwback issue where it was like, it was released, I think, on Memorial Day. I think it was released for that. And it, Quick Kick's on the cover, and I was just like, man, I really want to see more Quick Kick. I feel like he's been utilized in other media since, but just not in the way, like, I didn't think he was great in the Aubrey Citizen comics. I thought he really kind of ruined him as a character in that. And in, I think he made an appearance in the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover as well. But again, it was like a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing. So Quick Kick for me, I want to bring him back from the dead in the Marvel run. Any love for Quick Kick in the team here?
He was never one of my favorites. I had the figure as a kid.
I'm editing that out, by the way.
Yeah, he never it was the cartoon that ruined him for me. He was somebody that I would not have been friends with.
That's another thing in the Sunbow cartoon. I loved him, Alpine, and Bazooka, and they're like, I've always wanted a hiss tank. I never had a hiss tank, but I always wanted a hiss tank so I could put them underneath in the wheel wells, because they make that escape, don't they? But the hiss tank is like, there's nothing under there, so I didn't realize that as a kid. I thought there was loads of space and they could like hang on the axles and this kind of thing. Like, no, it ain't happening, mate. But I always loved that that aspect in the cartoons. Pyramids of Darkness, I believe.
For you, if is the upcoming Shang-Chi movie like your G.I. Joe 3?
Yes, much like, G.I. Joe 4 if you count Street Fighter the movie. Street Fighter 5 if you count Mortal Kombat. 6 if you count the new Mortal Kombat. 7 if you count the old Mortal Kombats. I feel like Street Fighter 2 is like unofficially Joe, so therefore the Street Fighter movie has become like an unofficial canon G.I. Joe movie.
You're saying that we should resurrect the idea of having the Street Fighters be part of the G.I. Joe team? Is that
100%? Yes. Another honourable mention there for the Resurrection honourable mentions.
Yeah.
That honourable mention list's massive, by the way, now. It's like everything. But yeah, Shang-Chi, I'm really looking forward to that movie. Really am. Can't wait. I'm kind of hoping for a Shang-Chi Snake Eyes crossover event as well at some point.
Maybe they can put out a classified G.I. Joe classified / Marvel Legends Shang-Chi Quick Kick 2-pack.
You see, they've already done the Shang-Chi, which is amazing, and I kind of use that as a de facto Quick Kick. But that would be wicked. I'd love to see that little Hasbro crossover.
We've got the contacts, man. drop some hints, yo.
I'm going to be doing it. Hey, Lenny. Right. General Hawk, could you make sure that... Right. Right, so we've come to the end then, guys.
Hawk as a marketer is like...
But him there now as well, still there. Like, as well, like, still doing it.
None may challenge Serpentor.
Yeah, that's the. We've come to the end, guys. Thank you so much. I know that took about an hour extra longer than we thought it was. Probably an hour and a half longer than we thought it was going to take. But I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for jumping on and chatting Spring Resurrections with me. In fact, I think Eric only... Eric, you only jumped on because you misread it. You thought Spring Erection? Yeah. I'm involved.
I thought it was high-res erection. I thought we were sending pictures back and forth, but okay. So just delete those. Don't open them.
No, it's too late. That's. How do you think? What do you think I'm using for all of the show notes? It's just going to be that.
There's an explosion. Super Friends.
Meanwhile, at the High Resurrection, So I hope you've enjoyed yourself, Pat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to be on. I enjoyed the tangents that we went off on almost more than the topic.
Yeah.
I think we could make episodes out of some of our tangents, couldn't we?
It's a lot of fun today.
No, it's good. I mean, that's the whole point. I like doing these and having discussions on it, and and I must admit,
just have an episode that's your top 3 tangents you want to go off on,
or all the ones we've done. I could make an episode now.
It would almost be a challenge because once you've chosen that as your tangent, then you
go off on another
something else.
Well, then you're dealing with subtangents that only exist when the DeLorean breaks down. In any case, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. For all the viewers and listeners and watchers and everybody, I hope you have a lovely holiday break period thing, if that's even a thing nowadays. I think everything is just the same, isn't it? Everything's so the same. There's hardly any change, is there, in anything like there used to be? I feel like you'd look forward to certain times of the year, wouldn't you? Like I get like a week off there or something, or like I get a long weekend. It's just non-stop now, isn't it?
There's no. We all dress like Cobra Troopers, and there's no line between work and home anymore because we all work from home. So you end up just coming and going and working all day. Like I never stop.
Yeah, it's tough. But having said that, I hope you enjoy our special drop today, our kind of spring holiday special. And guys, again, thank you very much. Really appreciate you jumping on. And Pat, we'll see you on Friday. No, hang on. We've already seen you. We've just seen you the day before.
No, because I wasn't there.
No, but I've already uploaded that. But
well, never mind.
Yeah, you will. Unless you're already thinking about oversleeping for the next episode. Pat, we've just seen you on the previous weekly. Hopefully that doesn't jinx that moment. And then we'll be seeing you next week as well, mate, for the next one, because unfortunately you're a lifer now in the weeklies.
Sounds
yeah.
Good.
Eric's like, I only have to do this once every now and again.
Yeah.
Our next special, believe it or not, is going to be Mother's Day next month. That's the American Mother's Day. The UK Mother's Day's already been, and I didn't want to... it was just easier to do one a month. So, Mother's Day. I'm not doing 2 Mother's Day specials. So hopefully we'll get some or a different or the same of you back again for that one when we look at our top 3 mothers. Our top 3, I'm guessing, mothers' moments in G.I. Joe. I haven't quite thought this through yet.
That many?
There's one episode of the Sumbo cartoon, and that's all I can think of.
And there's an episode of Renegades.
There you go. Done. There's our top 3.
They're the top 3. Those 2 are our top 3.
Amazing. Well, I've got my 2. I don't know what you guys are going to be having to look for. Anyway, we'll work this out. It might not be Mother's Moments. It might be something else, but it will be a Mother's Day special. In any case, guys, thank you very much for joining me for this one. And we'll be back to see you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for watching the Full Force Spring Holiday Special. Massive thank you to my awesome co-hosts Eric and Pat. See you next time, and as always, you know what to do, guys. After 3, 1, 2, 3, Full Force! I'm leaving all of that in. I'm leaving all of that in.
None may challenge Serpentor.
Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @The Full Force, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/The Full Force, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback and questions. We also have a Patreon page, so if you want to show your support for the show, see your name up in lights on these videos, or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/The Full Force Podcast, or click the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force.
None may challenge Serpentor.